Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on developing nature-based interventions and prevention interventions to build sustainable mental health services. It's really welcome to see all of you here. This webinar is the second webinar of a series of 4 aimed at really disseminating the best examples from the Net Zero Mental Health Report. There's much more information about that on the website of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, and more examples and more framework around our recommendations and the evidence base. So the specific parts of the report that this webinar is linked to are our recommendations around improving efficiency, quality, improving the efficiency and quality of patient care through sustainability, leveraging existing tools and methodologies, and promoting nature-based mental health care through increasing access to green space and social prescribing practices. So you'll hear 2 examples of nature-based practices. So the first example will be the South London and the Maudsley NHS Foundation Trust, who will present their innovative nature-based interventions and the benefits that they have seen to patient care and carbon reduction. And the second project is based in Somerset, and it's the Space Somerset, who have collaborated with South West Somerset Integrated Care System on an intervention that will demonstrate how they've improved prevention in mental health care interventions for children and young people, and how they've developed this with the local community of support and used the local nature-based resources. So I might introduce our speakers all at the beginning, and then Peter, who is based with SLAM, will kick off with the first presentation, and then there will be about 15 minutes of questions at the end. So do write them in the chat function, and we can pick them up at the end. So, so in terms of our presenters today, we've got Peter O'Hare, who is the head of occupational therapy at the South London and Maudsley Trust, and he's based at the Bethlehem Royal Hospital. He also trained in horticultural therapy and dance and movement therapy, and has extensive experience in working in specialist psychiatry services over 30 years. And he has a lot of other amazing achievements in his CV as well, but he's played a leading role in developing the award-winning sustainable initiatives at the Bethlehem Hospital, including building a walled kitchen garden and restoring old orchards and establishing kind of a nature trail. So I'm sure we'll hear a lot about that in his presentation. And in terms of the people from Somerset, we have John Pimblott, who started off his career as a chemist, but has been involved in social justice movements for the last few years, and has been involved with the space project since its inception in 2017, and has played a key role in the project. And Mandy Bancroft, who has a background in mental health nursing, and also a passion in terms of improving social equality, health and education, and has been a director of widening participation and student success at the University of West England. Great. So if we'll kick off with Peter, that would be great.
Great, thanks a million. Hello, everybody. Thanks for the lovely introduction. So I'm basically going to be talking about how we have developed our particular range of horticulture and nature-based interventions at Bethlehem Royal Hospital in South London as part of our sustainable healthcare initiatives. So if you can see this picture here, you'll see people walking through our restored orchards. And just to remind us why we're all here today, you can imagine yourself trying to walk through an orchard like this where the sun might be shining and green grass beneath your feet. You can hear the birds' song. There might be blossoms on the trees or apples on the trees. I think we can all relate to, how wonderful that experience can be and what it can do for our health, both our physical health and our mental health. And so, yeah, that's what I'm here to talk about today. It's been a long journey for myself. I've been in my job for almost 30 years, and this whole project has taken that long to evolve. So that's the first thing I'd say when dealing with nature. You have to think long term. So, but if you come to Bethlehem 20 years ago, you wouldn't see this orchard as it is now. It was totally overgrown, and we weren't doing any horticultural type activities with the clients, which seems remarkable looking back now. So our journey began when we started. It was the early days of co-production, working together much more with service users to get their opinions on shaping services. And when we asked them what they wanted, they said they wanted to be out in the open air more. They wanted gardening activities. So I was tasked with trying to get that ball rolling. So started initially with a small courtyard garden. And that was a matter of just, that's what the funds were available for. So that's another message I would give. Find out what funds are available and just see what you can use. So we started off small with a little garden. Again, it was very effective. People loved it. So we sought other opportunities. There was an old, ancient Victorian walled kitchen garden, which was very derelict. And I tried to get access in there, and we did for a short period of time and did a little bit of vegetable growing. Unfortunately, then there was a big building project on site. They were looking to build a huge new secure unit for South London, and we were the only site that was identified, and it had to go there. Unfortunately, it ended up with the wall kitchen garden being knocked down to build this secure unit. However, another message I would say, in adversity, it's amazing what opportunities come along. So we had sought, because we'd been in the wall garden just a little bit, we fought to get services for our clients. And, we pretty much lay in front of the diggers and stuff that were going to do the work to say, we need a garden. And we were given money to make a walled kitchen garden out of that. So that's the other thing I would say, even if you face diversity, learn from it and work with it. And that's what we've done to kind of get where we are today. So can I have the next slide, please? So this is springtime in Bethlehem at the moment. This is a recent photograph. So as you can see, there's lots of wildflowers there. And that's come about because of the journey we've been on has meant the landscape of the hospital has now been managed very differently as well. As part of this process, we've, even before we were really talking about net zero or, a big focus on sustainable stuff, the people who knew about nature and stuff were very much saying, we need to rewild the area, not to have all the grass cut. But it's taken a long time to change the processes to get them to where they are now. But that's another lesson we've learned. And so now we've discovered also that you can use your resources differently. And it actually doesn't take quite so much resources to manage things in this nature-focused way as it did to make sure the grass was cut all the time. So that was another lesson we've learned. Okay, as regards to the benefits of nature and working in outdoors, there's a lot of research being done now. Actually, the next slide, please. I think when we started this and started looking for the actual evidence, there wasn't as much around initially as there is now. We owe an awful lot to the Japanese, actually, because they've done an awful lot of research into forest therapy, where they've actually looked at its impact on the body so much. They've been doing it for years, actually. And I only discovered that myself when I did a forest therapy training. But, so we know the list of some of these things here that are on this slide, we know the actual physical impacts that it can have on people being outdoors, and so much to our physical health. But also from the mental health side, an awful lot of our clients who have depression, they can feel their mood lifting when they go out. For people who have issues with being on the autistic spectrum. They can relate differently to nature when they're outdoors and perform differently. I think almost every group we have, people with psychosis, can also, we found ways that they can, it moderates, you know, their thoughts and stuff and the way they react. With our forensic clients, it definitely helps reducing violence and stuff like that. So there's just like endless kind of benefits to be had. And I think we realize that now, and thank God we know now the evidence is all there. So that's really helpful. It's kind of not an issue. So we just need to know how we bring all these, you know, into use. And particularly on top of those more physical things, obviously with mental health, there's so much to do with social engagement and the potential for that, improved in self empowerment, and lots of potential for working jobs and everything else as well as that, as well as contributing to the maintenance of the environment as we now know we need to do. Okay, so can I have next slide, please? So I talked a bit about how we started with a small garden, and then we managed to be able to get funding for a kitchen garden. But another early thing we did, which is something to think about, is just how we help people get out there in the first place. Because we had lovely grounds in the hospital, but originally they just weren't being used. But people weren't sure about where to go. They didn't feel safe, actually. A lot of it was overgrown at one point in time. So what we did, we got together a group of people, myself, the estates team, and also people from the local borough, which was actually very important, as well as service users. And we plotted nature trails around the site. And we've ended up now, we've got 3 proper waymarked ones. And that was really, really helpful. It helped us look at the site and see all the nature we had there and try and highlight all the really important bits and places where people could see interesting trees or interesting birds or all different kinds of things. And so now the nature trails are really, really well used, and people actually come on site. It did a lot to help our engagement with the local population as well. Okay, we've had some issues we have to deal with now. We have so many people coming in, that's causing some other issues with an awful lot of dog walkers and stuff. But so we're working through that. So there's always unexpected consequences. But it's been very, very effective at getting people out there. The nature trails are constantly used. And as a therapy for clients as well, it provides a good structure for both clients themselves, if they're able to do it on their own, or staff who can work with them and guide them. It provides that sort of boundary and safety as well. So that's been really effective too. Next slide, please. So this is our wall kitchen garden. And again, it's been up now about 15 years. People think it's old because it's just kind of was designed like this. But it's been an important base for where a lot of our horticultural activities take place. And it's also become the base where we launched the other bits, the nature bits as well, and other things we do. So what I'd say is important about it is making sure that if you're lucky to have access to a garden, but in our case, we ended up actually designing this and having it built ourselves. I ended up designing it myself, actually, because we got this as part of the big secure unit that was being built. And people came in like, you know, they were contracted in to do a garden for us, but actually they came up with a plan, which we felt, actually, that's not going to work with our clients. So we actually redid it ourselves. And so it was important to kind of make sure it was going to meet all those needs in as many ways as possible. A walled garden provides a boundaried kind of area, so a contained environment, so people can feel safe to engage initially. It's designed to facilitate both fruit and vegetable gardening in the sort of time-honored way, but also we have wilder areas too, to make sure people can link in with nature too. Obviously indoor areas like the greenhouse and the polytunnels, and an indoor kind of working area. And to maximize therapeutic potential, raised beds were made so people with mobility problems could work at different heights. And also those raised beds, you can see some in the picture here, they're made in our woodwork workshop. So that's part of another process that service users are involved in the construction of those. Next slide, please. So this is just some of the considerations if you're thinking of, working on developing a garden yourself. These are the kind of things we took into consideration when we did ours. Co-creation and co-production, obviously really important, the amount of involvement with service users at every level. Things like accessibility, safety, and containment, really important. We have to do a lot of risk management, and people often have concerns about that, particularly when you might be using tools and equipment. So it's really, really important to manage the risk side of it really well. Definitely have to say that. But once you have all that in place and people trust in it, it's amazing how, effective these kind of things can be. With our forensic population, we don't have like incidents with violence, to be honest, in our garden. I can't think of any, touch wood, for an awful long time. People come because they want to be there and they want to interact and they want to be productive. So it's a way of harnessing all that physical stuff, which actually helps in general risk management, I would say. Okay, next slide, please. So yes, so stimulating the senses is a really important part. Here's a view of our central path in the garden, leading from the sundial at the center to a shady bench at the end. The lavender edge path provides visual, tactile, and olfactory stimulation, and in summer can be a buzz with bees. We have other sensory borders, particularly planted for sensory stimulation. Here you can see the ripe grapes, which grow along the south-facing side of the garden. The sight of them, when fully ripe, and the ability to just pick and taste can provide an element of fascination and wonder to many. So again, it's used a lot as part of therapeutic programs. And so there's potential for these things to be used in a variety of different ways. Next slide. I was just speaking to our OT who works in our affective disorders unit, asking her just to say what she thought. And these are the kind of things she came up with, the kind of ways they use the garden, things like using behavioral activation and activity scheduling for managing mood, and increasing the range of pleasant events as positive reinforcement. These are people often with severe depression. Sensory stimulation can really impact on that, self-soothing through visual and tactile experiences, all the opportunities for nurturing as well, and focusing on the future, and also the link to healthy eating, cooking, and self-care. Next slide, please. Okay, so as well as the garden, then when we got on to the nature trails, we started looking at forest therapy as well. I think once you start on this journey, it's amazing what other things open up to us. So now we do a lot of guided walks through the orchards and the woodland as well, and using meditation and mindfulness of various kinds. And again, it's a very effective medium for that. Here you'll see a lovely example of this is a feature we have in the orchard. This was actually made from a piece of fallen wood from our own forest, and done by a service user artist who loved to work in wood. And it's now become a lovely spot where people can go and make the most of that environment. So that takes a bit of planning, obviously, and organizing. So next slide, please. So here I would say are some of the essential components of the kind of service that we offer all together. It's important to have confidence and support from all parties. So that includes service users, all the clinical staff, particularly our estates and maintenance people as well. Having efficient systems in place. So you've got a referral system to our activities and our groups, which covers things like clinical risk as well as health and safety risks. Good ways of communicating with clients. Now, a lot of us and the services that use us, a lot of it is done through our occupational therapy staff primarily and activity coordinators. So that's really important for us. Our service is primarily for our inpatients, but we do link out to our community services, particularly for people who've just been recently discharged, as a linking into community services. But things like the estate support and the maintenance support has been very important to keep the gardens and the whole area properly managed, but that's a dynamic ongoing relationship that just needs to continue. You may have we've had specific other bits we'll do for individual services. Next slide, please. This is, for example, a little contract that the eating disorders service do with their clients. And because they're primarily inpatients with anorexia and have a lot of issues about overactivity, so their therapy staff came up with a little contract that they do, which is a way of how they address the issues of overexercising, but at the same time, it ensures we come up with the kind of boundaries and structures that help them really engage in gardening activities, which are very beneficial for them in very many other ways. And we've had other things we do with other specialist services as well. Next slide, too. We do a lot of creative stuff too. So we link in with our art department, and here you'll see this is a thing we did for the Chelsea Fringe, which is a kind of an art thing that goes in conjunction with the Chelsea Flower Show, where they came up with these scarecrows, or we call them carecrows, where different units, their service users and staff work together to create these. We do a lot of seasonal events, and of course that's another really important part of when you work with nature. There's such a seasonal aspect to things. So like recently we've just had our Halloween pumpkin carving. We had a big harvesting event. We'll have something at Christmas time, which will be all to do with wreath making. So that's a really other important part of all of this. Okay, next slide. Orchard restoration. I think this was particularly picked up because in the NHS forest sustainability stuff, they talked about our orchard because of the carbon capture that it's involved in. When someone came to look at our service and said, "Oh, are you aware that your orchard captures about 30 tons of carbon a year," which I didn't realize the figures, but that's really lovely to know and important to know. But we also have a lot of woodland on site too. So actually we figure we're something like 100 tons of carbon a year we seem to have, so which is great. The orchard restoration was a good example of collaborating with other community organizations. We collaborated with a group called the Orchard Project. They came in and they helped us identify the trees initially. In our old orchard, we've ended up actually replanting an orchard, but we've used heritage varieties to make sure, we're also contributing in to ensuring old heritage apple trees are kept going. It's a really important part of the sustainable initiatives that we offer. The clients have got so involved in the apples. So now the apples are harvested every year with our service users and also with volunteers that come in. We make juice and cider. We offload some to a company that does local cider. We also use it in cooking and making preserves and jams and stuff throughout the winter. So it really taps into all these sustainable initiatives, and all this stuff, it was there before and not being used. It now is there and being maximized, and at very low costs, really. So that's the wonder of some of these sustainable initiatives, where there are so many benefits that come out of it. Next slide, please. Just for those who are interested in how we work with our clients, we have a therapeutic progression, as we call it. So people come in at different times. Either if people don't have much skill at all or much confidence, they can start off in our small garden. They can expand their skills if they wish to in the wall garden. But we do a lot of vocational projects too, where people can train up and learn skills and also get paid. We've paid work groups in the garden and in our woodwork workshop and in our kitchen using the produce. And then also the final bit on this is the John Muir Award, and that's all to do with people learning more about the environment and getting an award for that. I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. So I'm aware time is moving on, so I just have the next slide. Yeah, so these just showcase some of the things we do, the vocational opportunities. People, when actually working to collect apples, can get paid actually at that time of the year. The other wooden stuff is where we built big compost heaps in our own garden, and that was done in our woodwork workshop. So the clients were very involved in that too. And so they can learn woodwork skills as well as gardening skills. Next slide. Yeah, so that just shows the harvesting opportunities. You can see we have an apple press, which we made as well in our woodwork workshop. So all these things kind of lead to other things. And we have a harvest day where a lot of people come in, volunteers and staff and patients, and that's become a wonderful event that everyone gets involved in. So all that community interaction is brilliant. Next slide. So also it links to our, mentioned about our woodwork workshop. So we now do these other bits that have come out of it to enhance biodiversity. So these are examples of bird boxes and bee hotels. And next slide, please. This also shows how we do a lot of restoration and recycling in saving old things. So here we had old benches on site. So instead of going off and buying new ones, we're recycling the old ones. And we've got a lot of recycled wood that we've used now in the wood workshops from lots of things that previously would have been discarded. So this just also feeds into our sustainability work as well. Next slide. I mentioned about the John Muir Award. This is a lovely award. John Muir was a Scotsman, actually, who was involved in setting up all big parks in America, actually. He's very famous over there. There's a John Muir Award, which is set up for people to actually go out and do conservation work. So they have to discover some wild area, explore and do something as a conservation activity, share their experiences, and then they get a nationally recognized certificate. We found this has been a really lovely way for our service users to be involved. They can discover wildness in our own hospital, but they also can do it locally to where they live. And it's been a lovely measured way of getting them involved in this activity as well. So yeah, and just going on to personal empowerment, this is a bit of my own journey as well, but I think it reflects a lot of what's happened for service users. We find so many people come to us and say, wow, because I got involved in stuff when they were with us, or it opened up their mind to the environment, they go off and do things. This is my own little journey. I inherited a field in Ireland some years ago after my dad died. And I said, well, what can I do with it? I plant trees. So 10 years later, I've got a woodland there. And you know, we're all contributing in our own way, and I think the impact is just amazing. So can I just have the next slide, please? So yeah, this is just a line from John Muir, and I think it mirrors what I feel myself, that everywhere we've on our journey that we've gone on, we've received far more than we sought, actually. And once you start linking in with nature, it's amazing the opportunities that are there. Yes, there are a lot of things to overcome. Definitely, you have to find your finances to get things to work. You have to cooperate with as many people as possible. In our case, really worked with our estates team was really essential, as well as all the clinicians. So it's a big bit of work, but there's something about nature that brings us all together and makes it all doable and manageable. And everybody always says, this is the right path. This is the right path we're on. And so we've been doing it for 30 years. It's still going strong. Everyone believes in it. So I'm very happy just to share that that's what our experience has been. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. It's been so amazing to see just the layers and the richness of all the opportunities that you could make with the natural space that you had. So we'll take questions at the end. So you keep them coming in the Q&A. So we'll move on to the amazing project in Somerset called the Space Somerset. And John and Mandy will be taking us through.
Good morning, everybody. My name is John Pimblett. I'm the chair of trustees for a small charity in Somerset called The Space. We're based in the Cheddar Valley. Mandy Bancroft is my vice chair and will be joining us later. Hi, Mandy. And hi to everybody. We are absolutely delighted to be able to share our journey and story with you this morning. Hopefully it's got some value for you and lots of questions. And Peter, thank you for your presentation. We're building an awful lot on what you said, and thank you for giving us the evidence, the sort of scientific background to what we've done, which builds on what you've done, I think. But before starting our journey, as the chair said, I've got no experience of mental health whatsoever, apart from working with my own kids and grandkids. I've got no experience of working with young people, or I've got no experience of charity work, even before 7 years ago. So ours really has been a roller coaster. So where are we? What do we do? Well, we're building a community of support to provide free of charge mental health and emotional well-being services for children and young people aged 5 to 17 in the Cheddar Valley and surrounding areas. That means we offer counselling, play therapy, and other early intervention support services that focus on children and young people's low mental health and emotional resilience. We've been supported throughout our journey by some amazing funders, as you see on the screen there, including Somerset CCG, now ICB, NHS Southwest, BBC Children Need, our National Lottery Community Fund, and our amazing community, without which we wouldn't be here. So if any of our funders are on, thank you very much for supporting us throughout our journey. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. Over the last 6 years, our journey has been a roller coaster of everything you can think of. And Mandy and I are bearing the scars to prove it. But you know, that smile on that young person's face, or their ability to answer questions, and we can answer those questions, that said it all for us. Next slide, please. Cheddar Valley, if you've been to see us down Cheddar Gorge or the Mendy Hills, is an area of outstanding natural beauty. It really is. And if you've been there, then you know all about it. However, like all rural areas, we have poor transport links, we're isolated, there's a lack of access to statutory and other services, and it'll come as no surprise to anybody that there are concerns over health, emotional well-being of our children and young people. Next slide, please. The population of the Cheddar Valley, which is an area that we cover, is approximately 4,000 children and young people. Wessex Learning Trust is the learning trust for our junior, middle and senior schools. We have a 3-tier school system here, formed under the Wessex Learning Trust. And we intervene with about 300 to 350 children and young people a year. Next slide, please. So our journey started, as the chair said, back in 2016. Over a chat, I had a chat with a young lady when I was recruiting young people to join our local medical centre patient group. And she told us what we unfortunately now know about young people's mental health. And he said, John, you're old, you've got grey hair, you don't really understand what young people are going through. And we didn't. And we didn't believe it. So we organised some local surveys with parents, and you know what the answers were. We then had a national lottery awards for all £10,000 grant to do studying, comprehensive focus groups, household surveys, all the research that you would expect us to do, because as Peter said, you have to talk to people, and the people that we talked to said, you won't get any funding at all, you won't start anything unless you do your research and get your data. So we did from that research. And we published, as you see there, Young People's Emotional and Wellbeing in Cheddar, and running a call to action from the Cheddar Community Partnership. There was a lady that we were talking to at the time, a lady called Doreen Smith, who was managing the hub for Mind in Somerset. And she knew everybody, the good and the great, and that report went everywhere. And you know, our journey has been characterized by the people we meet along the way, their advice, their willingness to help, prepared to go the extra mile and say, well, you know, you're not going to get very far unless you do X. So from their advice, we formed the Cheddar Community Partnership, CIC, which formed our legal base, our governance for our funding bids. And it was a CIC that published that report. Next slide, please. So we shone a light, and everybody who's been in our position, you have two choices. You either turn the light off and turn around and walk away and say, well, we can't do anything about it, or you leave the light on. And if you leave the light on, and beware. We came to the attention of NHS Southwest and Somerset CCG, which granted us our very first test and learn grant. Just amazing. And boy, did we test and did we learn. And the space was formed. But what exactly did we form? We had no offices, no premises. We were a virtual group. We were 4 directors of the Cheddar Valley Partnership. We had Heather. If you're on the call, Heather, thank you and hi. Heather started as our manager and counsellor, and really we started as a virtual organisation. Next slide, please. So we all know, coming to today, that as a consequence of lockdowns and current social tensions, our local young people face unprecedented circumstances and pressures on their emotional well-being and mental health, coupled with the isolation here of living in a very rural environment. Our Somerset Local Transformation Plan 2021 to 24 confirms that 1 in 9 children and young people in Somerset have a diagnosable mental health condition. The plan recognises there are at least another 7 children and young people who will experience emotional difficulties identified as mild to moderate, and if not supported, would and could deteriorate into diagnosable mental health conditions. Our local and statutory services in Somerset were overloaded, and it's led to an increase, as you see there, 150% rise in demand for mental health services since 2022. Next slide, please. Our nearest mental health services are in Taunton, the big Taunton hub, 60 miles away round trip. Weston-super-Mare is 26 miles away round trip. Where do we go? What do we do? Next slide, please. We see a rise in self-harm, anxiety, and A&E attendance, and a growing need for both one-to-one, face-to-face, and targeted group support, whatever that support is. So while access to statutory services has improved, we're finding the threshold of access is also higher. The waiting lists remain long. Lockdown intentions are worsening those effects, both for the numbers of young people, but the complexity those young people are now showing us. The complexities are increasing. Next slide, please. So our aim is to increase capacity for local community mental health provision, reducing that pressure on statutory services and reducing the emissions from travel. Recognising, as Peter has highlighted with the evidence that Peter showed, by engaging with our local green Mendip area of outstanding natural beauty, we can improve young people's resilience and coping skills, as well as their developing appreciation of the local environment. Next slide, please. So our experience so far, and I guess for many people on this webinar, as feedback from our statutory partners, parents, schools, voluntary organisations, we all confirm local intervention is crucial to give a chance for the child, young person, and their parents to develop and thrive. The crossover between behavioural issues and clinical mental health has not been bridged, and many children and people are falling into that gap. The Local Schools Partnership, the Wessex Learning Trust, agree that our local young people are approaching crisis levels. At the current time, in all 17 schools, there has been a big demand in anxiety. The level of suspensions at this moment in time has never been higher. Local hospital admissions for intentional self-harm and deliberate unintentional injuries, we're now in the red mark compared to our English partners. We're in the red mark in Somerset. Next slide, please. So we're now a small area. What are we trying to do about it? Next slide, please. So over the last 6 years, we've worked with local schools, NHS mental trusts, services, and the community. We're increasing capacity for local mental health services, developing a free of charge service, pro bono services across our age range of 4-year-olds to 17-year-olds. Next slide, please. So what that's meant, and you know, we've learned rapidly along the way. We're redesigning our child therapy services for under 8s. That's relatively new for us over the last sort of 2 years. Targeted face-to-face and group support for those children under 8. Increasing our support for face-to-face counselling for 9 to 17-year-olds, which is really our bread and butter. That's where we started with Heather Cole back 6 years ago. Next slide, please. And we recognise the benefits, as Peter said, the therapeutic benefits of those local green spaces and opportunities in the local community. Next slide, please. To really build on what Peter said, yeah, we have a community wellbeing allotment and green space as a therapeutic tool in our outreach activity program. Wildlife days, the pond building is great. Don't send your kids in dry clothes because they're going to get wet. Pond building, wildlife studies, wellbeing area, and an eco project we ran with Somerset Wildlife Trust. We've increased capacity with our weekly youth club, our community work and activities, enhancing that rural isolation and self-confidence in those people. Activities like we have a chill and chat area, trying to get young people to open up and just chat. Bird box building with a local men's shed, bee bombs with the Somerset Wildlife Trust, and working with the Green Influencer Scheme. Holiday activities for out-of-term holidays on the Mendips. Get outside doing archery and abseiling and rock climbing, caving, as you see in the photo there. But really, the way to have young people improve the way they feel about themselves, reducing isolation and building their resilience, and working with volunteer groups, cleaning up stretches of local community and recycling. We're working with the Ernest Cook Trust Green Influencer Scheme as part of our youth club and holiday activities, working with the Men's Shed, Parish Council, Mendip Rotary, and a whole lot more of groups, local groups. Next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about then, we've kind of rushed through starting and where we're doing and what we've been. What's been some of our inputs and outputs? Well, we've certainly now running at about 300 to 350 supporting children and young people a year, up from 120 young people a year ago. We know we've reduced on statutory demand on health services and on saving on emissions. We've been told that by the NHS. Next slide, please. We know we haven't got to go to Taunton or Weston without the EVA transport. We provide our services at the point of support within the schools, within the community. The parents and young people don't have to travel to see us. We are there for them. All of the activities on the Mendips, whatever, these people, young people, are exercising. They're using their own bodies as a mental health tool. Next slide, please. So we can demonstrate, as the next slide show, that 90% of our children and young people are averaging so a positive impact on their emotional wellness, resilience, 85% in forming relationships, reduce of suicide and self-harm. We can demonstrate reduction in anxiety, distress, improved interpersonal skills and confidence, engaging with local resource and activities, making new friends, reducing loneliness and boredom, increasing self-confidence and self-agency. Wow. And of course, their chance to thrive, which in turn means their lives of their parents and carers are also improving because they don't have to worry. That level of anxiety, hopefully, is being reduced at the level with the parents and carers. Next slide, please. So, on our initial assessments that we do, and this slide is the last 3 months. Ignore the numbers at the bottom slide, please. They don't mean a great deal. They're just a means of trying to rate the Pareto chart. The brownie red is a play therapy, that's 8 years and under, and the counselling is 9 to 17 from our services. Key support area, anxiety. Everybody tells us the schools, the self-help people in the schools, NHS tell us anxiety is number one, whether that's schools anxiety, classroom, home, society, wherever that anxiety comes from is number one. Anger, the behavioral issue from that anxiety or by itself. Self-esteem, feelings are mirrored by from our play therapists as well in the 8 years and under, which I find as an older parent truly amazing. Bullying, relationships, suicidal thoughts, self-harm. Yeah. Next slide, please. So we use two methodologies to measure, and the people who know us will know us that we are measurement mad. We present our quarter reports to everybody, both using SDQs, both using Core YP, Core 10YP, and our feedback sheets. And SDQs for 8 years and under, and we're learning how to use this tool properly as we develop our service. We're not quite yet there yet. But our data people and therapists tell us, yep, 87% we can demonstrate has a positive reduction in their difficulty scores from the short-term intervention we're now doing. We don't have long-term in terms of 1 year, 2 years. We're fairly short, maybe 15, 16 sessions. Next slide, please. From our core YPs, which are for our 9-year-olds to 17-year-old counselling service, we can demonstrate an 85 to 90% improvement in those core YPs. We don't yet have a system of follow-up of the people who have left our service to say, well, how's it been for you? How's your mental health now? Has it been sustainable? And maybe we should think about that going forward to try and close that loop. Next slide, please. We love our feedback sheet. So where we're not officially measuring whether the activities, the gardening, the youth club, the community work, we are inundated with children, young people's and parental feedback sheets. We love them, but they tell us some important data. 57%, yeah, stop feeling lonely. 75% more confidence. You know, Peter, with your work as well, getting outdoors on the Mendips, walking, whatever we're doing, that is an amazing stat. It really is. If we can help those people sustain that, that's truly amazing. The youth club, well, of course, yeah, we can just chill and chat, making new friends. We do multiple activities. Our youth club themes, because we're a community of support, are mirrored on the themes we're obtaining from counselling and under 8 therapies. It's not just a standalone youth club as such. We're using the same theme. So if there's a bullying theme, we will tackle bullying, we'll tackle emotions in the youth club. Is that theme for the day or theme for the week? So we try and do a horizontal theming of ideas to try and get this chill and chat talking about people, getting these children to open up and talk and to express themselves. Celebrate our differences, be free and don't have to worry. And, you know, we didn't realize how hard it was to run a youth club until we started. We opened it about 2 years ago as an extension of our other services. And wow, yeah, Mandy and I will testify. It's pretty unique, but we are determined that it's going to continue. Next slide, please. So what's next? Well, building a sustainable organization for the future. We are typical of a startup charity. We've dashed, as this presentation has been a dash. We've dashed, we've rushed, we've done things properly in terms of safeguarding governance, yes, or else we wouldn't be funded by the people that fund us. But we now need to build or transform that into a sustainable organization for the future, which means, of course, recognizing what the future may be and recognizing the norm, the new norm, is not where we're at now. Children and young people's mental health is changing so quickly. The landscape is changing so quickly. We have to be ready for whatever that norm is. Next slide, please. we're building capacity for our therapy services for under 8s, 9-17s, holiday activities, the youth club, community work, the gardening work. Next slide, please. And really, as Peter and I have both said, you must talk to everybody. The people that we've talked to on our journey have been amazing, and they've sent us in directions we didn't now know about. 6 months ago, I guess, we'd never heard of Connect Somerset, the great horizontal connection scheme from Somerset Council, trying to join services horizontally rather than vertically. And now we are a host area champion for Connect Somerset. Talk to the community, talk to the voluntary sector organisations, talk to statutory partners. Everybody is more expert than us, and we listen and you learn. Next slide, please. Next little bit. Oh, we missed one. Okay. And that, sorry. Oh yeah, sorry, I missed it. The community family hub now moving into working with families, working with parents directly and families as a next extension of what we're doing, and building our own therapy room. Next slide, please. Learning, right. Well, open up, Mandy, if you're having more than us, but what's been our learning? Well, we all know that children and young people are facing unprecedented circumstances. We know that. Early intervention is key. Age-related and complexity are key issues. The earlier, the better, and free of charge. Parental and family support. We're all learning as of now. We all know this. Everybody on this webinar knows that. So why isn't it happening? We can't answer that. We can only tell you what we've done. Next slide, please. So, learning and a replication of what we've done. Don't start big, whether it's a hospital garden, community garden, sustainability is a key. Can you keep it going? You can't change the world, but you can shine a light, and be prepared to follow other people's examples. Funding is hard. What's even harder, you will not be able to start, and we couldn't start unless we had some kind of legal entity, some community. And ours was a community CIC as a foster home, where you can get your governance and where you can apply for funding grants as a recognised legal entity. Co-working and learning is essential, horizontal, not silos. But we all know working in silos. And the old cycle, the old improvement cycle of listening, adapting, reviewing, adapting again, change, listening, going round again. Our first test and learn, we did all kinds of things and they didn't work. So we unashamedly shut them down and moved on. And I dare say in the future, in fact, we tried to run a listening service for parents. It didn't work for all kinds of reasons. So we shut it down. Measure and measure again. Don't make it bureaucratic. Feedback sheets, talking to young people, talking to children. We don't do enough of that. Certainly Space does not do enough of that yet. But measure and measure again. Because everybody will ask, where's your impacts? What outputs have you made? And you know, like all of us, believe you can do this. And lastly, really what it's all about. Next slide, please. Maybe not be able to read that. Maybe I can do. It's a feedback from a mum of a 5-year-old girl, and to us it's priceless. What did we do well? Very supportive, caring, understanding, non-judgmental. What could we do better? Nothing. You've all helped Erin and I in more ways than we thought possible. And I need to say how wonderful Erin's therapist is. She helped us both through a really difficult time and helped my little girl so much. We're eternally grateful. Thank you so much. You know, of all the heartache and roller coaster ride we've been through, that says it all and puts a smile on Mandy's now face. Next slide, please. So now roller coaster presentation. And from everybody at the Space, we wish you well and thank you. And I hope we have loads of questions how we can help you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, John. So what really struck me is that it seemed like initially just really keen people getting together and creating initially just a virtual space, a virtual structure that then became a catalyst for building so many different things around it, and then physically changing the local environment to kind of making it into a much more kind of healthy, locally embedded space for both young people and their families. I also realized I probably forgot to introduce myself at the beginning. So I'm Dr. Shou Zhang. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatry trainee, and I'm also the Nature Matters co-lead at the Planetary Health and Sustainability Committee with the college. So some of the themes and that you were mentioning about the challenges to services with young people really, really resonate. And it's also been really amazing in this seminar to hear from a rural context and an urban one, and to see some of the similarities and actually some of the differences as well. So just coming to some of the questions in the Q&A, thank you very much for the people who have posted. So I think the first two are a bit similar around training opportunities and where can people find more training about horticultural therapy and also meditation, mindfulness therapy.
Yeah, hello, can I just say that obviously Thrive, the main horticultural therapy organization in the country, do quite a lot of trainings at the moment, including so much they call horticultural therapy itself, and particularly training to get people initially involved. It seems to be, the area seems to be changing a bit. I did a postgraduate diploma in horticultural therapy at Coventry University, which was actually brilliant. And they moved on to do a master's degree at Coventry in horticultural therapy. Now, I was looking into it again recently, and it looked like it might have stalled for the moment, so I'm not quite sure what's happening there. I think that COVID had affected them somehow, and there was some issue there. I'm hoping they'll redo that. But there are other places offering. Certainly, the training I did at Coventry was brilliant because half the cohort were therapists like myself, occupational therapists mostly. The other half were gardeners or horticulturists. And so in the first year, all the therapists ended up doing gardening training and all the gardeners did therapy training. And then we all came together in the second year. So it was a brilliant way of, learning from each other and developing skills. And I loved the first year, spent loads of time at a horticultural college up in the Midlands, and it was just fantastic. So there's plenty out there, but I would start with Thrive. It's the first, because they do quite a lot of training, both at their centre near London and also wider around the country. So that's a good starting point.
Great. I don't know whether John and Mandy, you have any thoughts on this, and whether you've thought, I guess quite a lot of your ethos has been kind of test and learn, but whether there's been anything that you've done along the way or any trainings that you've done along the way that have been very helpful.
If I can start, I think the training has been really the groups that we have come into contact with. Like, we didn't think about starting a wellbeing garden, a horticultural garden, our allotment donated with the parish council until I think I'm right, it was a local Somerset group called Roots and Shoots, who I think was a more, I have no idea, Peter, whether that's a national group or whatever, but we were somehow led into Roots and Shoots. And they, again, yeah, we'll train this and then Somerset Wildlife Trust. So not one body of training as such, but people like the wildlife people, the Somerset Avon Wildlife Trust, Roots and Shoots, with their teams coming to support them and training on the job, if you will, have been absolutely fantastic. It's those groups that you don't know exist for us until somebody has said, have you spoken to John or Mandy or Peter or whoever? And they say, no, we haven't. Let's have that conversation. And our training has really come through that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that because certainly all our orchard work, we totally relied on the Orchard Project, and it started as a London Orchard Project and now a national project. So if you're anywhere in the country, you should be able to access them, and they get quite a bit of funding to help people establishing and maintaining orchards. So they're the ones who certainly trained us a lot, provided training sessions they came in and ran training sessions for us, and we continue to have them come in at various points where we need specific skills, depending on the time of year, whatever it is. They helped us with planting. They helped us with looking at our old trees and how to prune them and save them. So that was another way of embedding the training within our service and getting a lot of the service users to be able to learn from that as well, while upskilling ourselves too. So I totally agree with you, John. Yes, and there are a lot of other similar types of organizations with specific interests and specific remits that can be called on to help.
That's a really lovely example, Peter, of like learning together with both kind of staff and service users. So I guess staff might have their our kind of expertise in different areas, but we can all kind of learn how to prune fruit trees together. So the next question is a really important question that often gets asked, is that evidence indicates that people from ethnic minorities are less likely to access green spaces. Are there any lessons from both projects around improving engagement and access for these groups?
Yeah, good question. And it is something we have tried to address. And we've managed it to a reasonable amount, but that's because a lot of our client group come from a very diverse local London area. So we do have quite a mixed group. And we've done things from, okay, I have to say our biggest incentive, which has worked with our primarily young Black men who are in our secure service, I have to say the vocational and the funding side of things seems to be the thing that really engaged them, but that's kind of really worked as well. And it's very skills development sort of focused, but that seems to have worked and brought a lot of those in. We've done various things with trying to work with even the different kinds of crops we grow and foods and stuff we do to try and reflect more maybe what different cultures might prefer, and particularly having our greenhouses and stuff that has helped us do that. And we've engaged clients in, coming forward with what they want to be involved in. So that's also helped. And also, I know just some local projects as well, and it's been more about just the local community themselves leading on that and being seen to be leading on it, and kind of seems to have helped bring their communities in different ways. So yeah, that's been our experience.
Sure, maybe I'll pick this one up as well from some experience that I had working in Bristol. There was a Black and Green ambassadors group that particularly looked at that. So that might be something people might want to have a look at, and might be helpful in terms of how to engage ethnic minority groups into green spaces. And interestingly, as Peter and John were talking, one of the things I've often thought about, and I don't know how we do it, is how we bring rural and urban communities together and demonstrate the differences and share experiences. Haven't quite worked out how to do that yet, but I think we would learn a lot from each other.
And I guess go on, Peter.
Oh no, it's fine.
I guess I was just thinking when you were answering, and also during a bit of the talk, because so people have this resource in rural settings but might not actually be making use of it. And also, conversely, we don't want to make people garden in inpatient settings who might not actually want to garden either. So I guess what you were saying about thinking about having a range of options, and the vocational and the skill building might be something that some people might like more than others, but also thinking about, I guess nature's or kind of the wider environment has many different dimensions that can appeal to different people, and maybe meeting people where they are at.
Absolutely. I think we found even, because we are a bit odd that we have good, lovely green grounds, but we serve a very, urban clientele, really. And I've been surprised. Sometimes we've taken people in and, trying to introduce them to nature. And some people who've been living in council flats all their lives are scared of walking out into nature, because of the bees and the insects and everything. I've had that experience with a number of young people. So it's been a kind of a gradual exposure we've had to kind of do with them. So there's lots of interesting issues there to be looked at, definitely.
So then we had a question about small spaces. So a challenge that we have locally is that many of our main sites don't really have extensive, considerable green spaces. We tend to have small and enclosed courtyards. It'd be great to hear about any ideas that could promote and encourage nature within smaller areas.
Again, I'm happy to say we have a lot of small little courtyard gardens as well in our hospital. Some are attached to actual inpatient wards. I can think of our intensive care area where people can't actually leave, so a garden has been made in an enclosed area. So it is amazing what you can do, but you need obviously someone with the design and gardening skills to do that. But certainly our first courtyard garden we did here, we had big kind of arches and stuff going up the walls. So it actually gave the impression of a wider space so that people really could feel a little bit more that they weren't so enclosed. So there are many, garden designers and people who are used to kind of working with those sort of ideas, and things like including maybe a water feature or something where you can, and the sensory planting, you can do an awful lot to make a small space. People will know from watching gardening programs, it's incredible what can be done, but obviously it does need, the skill actually just to do that. And obviously that'll be a certain amount of expense, but there is definitely a lot of potential. We certainly have a number of small courtyard gardens, which people find really effective. We have one in our mother and baby unit, for example, for the mothers and babies to go out there, and that's been really effective, and it's not a big space. So I wouldn't feel too, restricted by that myself.
And building on what Peter has just said, we find from our feedback sheets some great feedback from our indoor activities that we do, as well as the outdoor ones that we do. We have an equal number of indoor activities for those children, young people who really don't like going outdoors. So we have a whole range of indoor activities. I'm trying to think, Mandy, I know there was, I'm trying to think of what those are, both in the youth club and specialist out of term holiday period activities. Mandy, my mind's gone blank as to what those activities are we do inside.
I guess maybe one example was the youth club. It's also about how you bring the outside in. I mean, we're very lucky in Somerset to have access to all sorts of wildlife. So, for example, this week at the youth club, we were able to have owls come in so that the young people could understand owls. But so an external event in an internal place, if that makes sense. So I think sometimes it's thinking creatively about how you get the messages of the outside space across.
I know in the holiday activity program, I've seen photographs of young people with clay, covered in clay, trying to mold in clay, wet felting. I think they're trying to do some wet felting. There was something with wire drawing with wire that was impressive. So, there are lots of things that, yes, the horticulture aspect is important if you can get outside, but if you can't, to get those people confidence and talking to each other, chatting with each other, then there's a lot of indoor work that can be done as well.
So yes, and I guess bringing what you said, Mandy, the outside in, and also some of it's about creating this space in people's minds and opening up spaces in people's minds to be able to explore, to be able to go then outside. So then this might be the last question. So a question for Peter from an OT student working in mental health. Do you have any tips on advocating for green spaces for mental health services within densely urban settings. For context, Catherine, who asked the question, is currently working in Northwest London.
Mm-hmm. Again, I would say to tap into whatever's happening locally from sustainable initiatives, because most, and certainly in our part of London here, nearly every borough is supporting sustainable initiatives at the moment. So there are usually community allotments, and there's usually local groups that are doing stuff. So definitely make sure you know what's going on locally. Even people like the Orchard Project who worked with us, and actually they do a lot in North London particularly, and they're also available even to help in small spaces, even if it's just planting an apple tree or 2 apple trees or whatever. They're doing a lot of stuff with, you know, estates and things like that. So it definitely would link into as many of those local resources as possible. Everybody is now saying, yes, we all need to do sustainability. And there is, you know, so there are funds available in different areas, as John has been mentioning too. I mean, you just got to seek out on what there is, but there is quite a lot. The NHS forests themselves are giving trees to a lot of people at the moment. I had them ring me up again this week, but we just can't take them. But, you know, so there are a lot of initiatives to tap into as well. And you don't need to do so much persuading nowadays like we used to do. Everyone seems to agree. So it's just a matter of finding what spaces there are in your borough, or whatever they may be, or what potential there is, even if it's a courtyard space or something. And then use the kind of evidence to persuade people if you have to, but and just persevere. Make sure you do, if you need to do your own training yourself, so you feel on top of things and kind of be clear. But again, definitely get the other people on board that are already involved in this area in the local community.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks, Peter. Don't reinvent the wheel when you're facing your blank piece of paper, as we all are. You know, I want to do this, I want to do X. I want to build a gardening project in an urban environment, which we haven't got here. But if it's a blank piece of paper, there is somebody locally who has a keys to the door, who will be able to unlock that door and say, well, hang on, have you heard about so-and-so? We've done this or we've done that. It takes a lot of tenacity, a lot of feet on the ground or web searching or whatever. But normally, we wouldn't be where we are unless we hadn't got the people around us who didn't know they could help until we asked them. And then they said, yeah, we've got an idea. Mandy, any last comments on that?
No, just to echo what you've both said, I think don't reinvent the wheel. There will be somebody there that has done it before you. And certainly from the Spaces point of view, I think we wouldn't be where we are now without that support. So do ask.
Yeah.
And I think, thank you for the sage advice. And for me, I think for both projects, you started very, very small and then built up. So it's taking really small steps, because otherwise, if you kind of, if you kind of started to say you need to do kind of everything all at once, then that can probably get quite overwhelming. But I think, so thank you all so much. You've had such really wise insights. I've learned so much from all 3 of you. So just the last thing to say is all of the recordings for the webinars and our slides will be on the Knowledge Hub that you can access via the link or the QR code on the slide here. And also thank you to Emily and Maria for their support technically, and also with getting all the webinars together and bringing all the speakers together as well. There's lots of work behind the scenes. And thank you to the audience and the participants for all of your amazing questions.
Thank you.